the pain like.
Hey guys, dearyoongi here, and welcome back to my channel. I recently started discussing the different types of personas that some K-pop idols get assigned by their labels, and on the back of that video, I asked you guys for some suggestions of personalities and personas you'd like me to discuss next, and one I saw mentioned quite a few times was the innocent image some idols have to portray, so that is what we'll be discussing in today's video. Before we go any further, let's first discuss what we mean by the innocent image in K-pop. The innocent image in K-pop refers to a persona that some idols might portray where they seem extremely pure, sweet, and modest. The idea of innocence in the K-pop world is often interlinked with serenity and beauty, implying that idols with this image have a much more natural and, dare I say, cute and youthful beauty about them. Of course, this statement alone carries a whole heap of its own issues, which we'll get into later, but for now, hopefully we're all on the same page with regards to what sort of charms are expected of an idol with an innocent image. They're expected to be youthful and naive. Unfortunately, there aren't too many ways I can elaborate on the term innocent without saying idols with this image are supposed to look innocent. We all hopefully know what innocent means, so let's move on to some examples. Before we do jump into the examples, I do just want to clarify that when I did the cool mysterious guy persona video, we did strictly include examples of idols who have pretty much confirmed that they were given this image by their label. Some of the examples we're about to discuss were definitely assigned the innocent image by their company, whereas others I think might have been forced upon them by the industry in general, and then their company has just rolled with it, or some might have even been the result of fan opinions and perceptions of them. We'll clarify which ones are which when we get to them, so let's look at our first example. NCT's Renjun. Renjun is actually one of my main inspirations for this video, because a few people brought his statement about the image he was assigned to my attention. Renjun debuted as a member of NCT Dream, which for those who aren't aware, was the NCT subunit where when they debuted, they were marketed as a very young, bubbly and fun kind of group. They were like the youngest members of NCT. In their earlier years, SM Entertainment had Renjun introduce himself as Soonsu, which meant pure boy, and he was known amongst fans for his like cute image and how he appeared a little bit timid, like, you know, young, that sort of thing. When Renjun appeared with the group on Weekly Idol, he actually confirmed that the company had given him an innocent image to portray, but that wasn't his real personality at all. And he had proven this because fans who really knew the group and the members knew Renjun for his sass and boldness with fellow group members, never afraid to just tell them how it is, which would be the complete opposite of somebody with the innocent image, who are expected to remain quiet and respectful at all times, you know? We saw proof of who Renjun really is as a person because after he made this confession on Weekly Idol exposing the label, he jokingly started to introduce himself as pure boy Renjun even more often on social media posts, almost sort of sarcastically and ironically, which I think was brilliant of him. Our next example, unfortunately, is not so fun, and that is Shinee's Taemin, and this one is a bit much to be honest, and you'll see why. I'm expecting some of the comments on this video to say, well, a lot of these examples were young when they appeared to have this image, so maybe it's just who they are. And while I completely understand that, and it is likely that a lot of these idols are happy to be innocent in a way, the way Shinee's Taemin was treated from debut is not okay. As many of us know, Shinee's maknae Taemin is renowned for being one of the youngest maknaes of all time, being around 14 years old when Shinee made their debut. And Taemin's image at the time was being super youthful, having like the long swept hair for a while, you know the type. I'll throw some images on screen. He looked like such a young teenager, and he perfectly suited this innocent image because he really was a baby, to be honest. Too young to be debuting, that's for sure. But the problem with Taemin having this image at the time, regardless of whether or not SM Entertainment intended this, by the way, it unfortunately led to him being treated rather inappropriately by elders in the media. Far too often, Shinee would appear on variety shows where the hosts would make a big deal about the fact that Taemin was deemed as desirable by people much older than him because of his innocent beauty and long hair, quote, making men question their sexuality. At the time when a lot of these interactions were taking place, Taemin was barely 16 years old, and you can physically see how uncomfortable he gets when he has to laugh off these sort of comments. There were often occasions where the other members of Shinee had to kind of come to his defense or politely try and change the subject. This whole ordeal of the way Taemin was treated as a youngster in the industry honestly deserves its own video because there's so much I could say. His welfare was not taken into account by those whose job it was to protect him, and the only real evidence we saw of him receiving support was from his fellow group members, who note were not that much older older than him themselves. A couple more examples I wanted to touch upon aren't necessarily idols being assigned the innocent image or personality to portray, but ways in which this innocent image is kind of enforced upon idols by their companies and even fans. One example of an idol kind of forced to remain youthful in their image is BTS's Jungkook when they debuted. Again, Jungkook is another idol who debuted very young, and when BTS were following a bit more of a bad boy image at debut, Jungkook himself was welcomed to join this, if you will, often being jokingly labelled as an international playboy even at like age 15, 16. Again, not appropriate, but we'll move on. But even though he was allowed to join in on the bad boy personality, Big Hit were definitely expecting him to retain an innocent maknae image visually, which of course, as you can imagine, is very challenging when you're told to portray a certain personality, and the two are completely conflicting. I've been in ARMY for a long time now, and I do seem to recall Jungkook mentioning a long time ago that the label did ask him to refrain from exercising too much and gaining too much muscle so he could maintain a childlike image for as long as possible. Whether the company meant this because they wanted him to look innocent, or if they meant this more in a protective way in terms of they didn't want him to put too much pressure on himself to look ripped at a young age, I don't really know, because we don't know for certain if he was assigned an innocent image to follow. But it is interesting to consider why they would have asked him to do that. And we haven't looked at any examples of female idols assigned the innocent image yet in this video, but of course there will be plenty. There is one, however, in particular I wanted to speak about that is another SM Entertainment artist. I actually wanted to touch upon the perceived image of the group Girls' Generation in their earlier years. When Girls' Generation were promoting regularly in their very early days, they were kind of highlighted for being natural beauties. And because of this, fans seem to associate the idea of their beauty with their youth. This is what I mean when I mention the influence fans can have on the image of a group, because I'm not 100% certain if SM intended to assign them an innocent beauty's image, or if the fans kind of did this themselves. Because I think once SM Entertainment clocked onto the fact that fans were viewing snsd as angelic and naturally beautiful, they really played into this. To make them look as youthful as possible, they would have them wear their hair very simply, they'd wear minimal makeup and simple pretty clothing to kind of keep them all looking similar and innocent. Part of me wants to play devil's advocate and argue that on the flip side, this perhaps was what was the trend at the time, because Girls' Generation did experiment with a few different concepts years down the line, and we got to see them change up this innocent image. But at the same time, I can't do this because I have to look at it objectively. Girls' Generation were one of the biggest groups around at the time, so they were definitely not following the trend, they were sort of the trendsetters. And therefore, any alterations in their image were likely due to the label trying to appease what fans wanted to see from them. In this case, that was the young, innocent beauty image. Okay, so now we've looked at some examples, let's look at the potential reasons why labels might assign this image to an idol or group, or at least go along with it and encourage fans to view them this way. One more simple reason could be the idea of a relatability. The more innocent image is often seen to be more relatable in general than that of, say, a bad guy or someone who's more of a troublemaker, because in general, most people tend to be good people who want to follow good examples. With the K-pop industry itself being very strict on proper standards, a lot of companies will want to ensure that they are portraying this with the idols who follow the same strict rules. They are then hopefully able to portray this image to a wide audience who find the innocent or good person persona much more relatable than somebody who is known to cause mischief or a bit more outside the box, if you will. This is also why in general media outside of K-pop, superheroes and good guys, if you will, are often seen to be more popular because they are the protagonists who usually save the day and people want to be more like them. They are more liked, more relatable. The media doesn't necessarily want us to look up to bad influences, and the same goes for K-pop. So by assigning some idols the innocent image, they are ensuring that fans are reminded of the right and wrong ways to behave in their opinion, if that makes sense. I'd love to be done there with that being my only theory of why this image exists, because this is the more naive and ironically innocent way to look at the topic. However, there is a sort of darker potential reason that this image is portrayed that we probably are all thinking, and therefore I do have to mention, and that is the idea of infantilization. For those who don't know, infantilization is treating somebody who isn't necessarily a child in a childlike manner for a prolonged period of time. Individuals who are infantilized are often left feeling feeling dehumanized and treated with disrespect by those around them, who act as though they are children and incapable of things when they might be older and much more capable than people allow them to show. Unfortunately, the K-pop industry has been long accused of infantilizing its idols through things such as overly cutesy concepts for adults, dressing them in school uniforms or childlike outfits, forcing them to do aegyo and act cute even when they're adults and uncomfortable with this. Therefore, it is highly likely that giving idols this innocent image is another way in which K-pop companies are able to push the idea of infantilization on their artists, almost encouraging viewers to perceive them as younger people. Following on from this, I think it's the perfect transition into the negative effects of this innocent image and what it leads to. Often, idols assigned the innocent image have issues shaking this off when they become older and almost have to fight extra loud for their voice to be heard and for people to stop treating them like children. I feel like some idols may have had a more natural progression into their authentic and adult selves. For instance, Taemin, who was able to start being more of who he wanted to be by the time he was an adult releasing solo music. But some idols, even in their adult years, do struggle to navigate the expectations put on their persona versus who they really are and want to be. I don't want to repeat or promo myself too much, but I produced a video last year titled Forever Young, K-pop Stans versus the Battle to Let K-pop Idols Grow Up, which kind of perfectly summarizes this issue. When an idol is constantly seen as younger or assigned an innocent image, as soon as they get older or no longer want to be seen as portraying this image, fans will have an issue with it and accuse them of changing simply because they now appear different than we are used to. We mentioned BTS's Jungkook earlier, and ridding himself of the innocent image is something he has struggled with in recent years. Following the release of Jungkook's solo tracks 7 and 3D, fans had a lot to say about the explicit lyrics, and Jungkook himself had to speak out in defense of his own music, reminding fans that he is now an adult. Jungkook himself was born in 1997 and would have been around 25, maybe 26, at the time these tracks were released, and he shouldn't have been put in a position where he had to explain the slightly explicit lyrics because the songs were not necessarily aimed at younger audiences to begin with, but unfortunately because he is known for portraying a more innocent image in the past, he had no choice but to explain himself. Another example we addressed in that video was Blackpink's Lisa. Although Lisa wasn't necessarily ever assigned an innocent image, she is Blackpink's maknae, and therefore this usually does come with the ties of being the most innocent member, even when all members of the group are adults with a more girl crush image like in Blackpink's case. When Lisa got the once in a lifetime opportunity to perform at the Crazy Horse Cabaret in Paris, a large number of fans were furious about this because it went completely against the innocent or respectful image they expected from her. Fans did not take into account Lisa's performance being tasteful or an incredible opportunity for any dancer. They immediately jumped to question her image and what this now meant for their innocent maknae, rather than viewing her as a grown woman doing something as a professional job. The other main issue I think we need to address with the innocent image is the pressure idols will feel to upkeep this. When we have cases of idols being assigned this image when it isn't necessarily who they really are, they're going to find it extra difficult to maintain this image because they will be hiding their true selves. Idols are already put on this pedestal of perfection when they themselves are only humans and are often young people trying to find their way in the world. We often see cases of idols having to apologize for being spotted at the club in their 20s or having relationships in their teens. And that's just idols in general, let alone those who have been assigned an innocent image. Could you imagine the outcry if someone with an innocent image was caught behaving like a normal young person? It's a difficult and unrealistic expectation to place upon somebody who is competing with so much in the industry already, such as grueling schedules, diets, expectations of professionalism throughout the mistreatment, etc. Let's wrap things up and conclude my thoughts on the innocent image. I think the issue with the innocent member image is that on the surface it can appear harmless and like they're trying to just add an air of relatability or trying to tell people not to grow up too fast. However, just from knowing how the K-pop industry is with the issue of infantilization in general, I unfortunately cannot just see it on the surface level as simple as that. And there will always be the part of me that worries when I see an idol clearly assigned this image. 1, do they even want to be seen this way? 2, how are people treating them with with this image? And 3, are they going to struggle if they eventually want to shake off this image and be somebody else? The innocent image feels like it will somehow always link back to the stereotypes of what is expected of somebody who is well-behaved, proper, and young. And K-pop in the past has been called out for its issues with ageism and expecting people to be young and sort of shunning idols who are over 30, as if they're old news. Enforcing this image on people who are already young is only going to further push that narrative of how old to be as an idol in the industry. And then we have to look at the examples of idols who know this isn't really who they are. For idols who don't choose to have this persona like Renjun, we are almost encouraging them to not be their authentic selves, and that can only do more harm than good in the long run. And this is before we even consider the stress I think it would cause someone who has to maintain it. I think regardless of whether or not this image is something we're keen on, I cannot see it going anywhere in the K-pop world. Even if we don't strictly hear of idols being assigned the innocent role, this innocence is still something that will likely be expected of them. Okay guys, and that was it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching if you got this far. I feel like I'm getting into a habit now where even at the end of the video, there's so much more I wanted to say, but I don't want to keep you guys for like half an hour at a time. If you would like to see longer videos, please let me know and I'm more than happy to do them. You know I like to talk. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and I would love to hear your thoughts on this persona in the comments and any others you'd like us to discuss in the future. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to be the first to hear whenever I upload, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys!